Driving for Uber, like any of the gig-based apps out there, isn't as simple as just clicking a button and driving. There is a lot to delve into when you really break down the infrastructure of what driving for Uber actually is. And there's a lot to love, and a lot to hate. So in this video, let's actually list out the pros and cons of driving for Uber so you can really compare if it's the best side hustle for you. Hey everyone, it's Kian for the Rideshare Guy, pronounced Kian. And guys, if you want one of the immediate pros of being an Uber driver, it means you get to learn alongside the rest of us Uber drivers on the Rideshare Guy. So by the way, if you aren't already subscribed to the Rideshare Guy, make sure you go hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a new video. And Uber is one of the more straightforward apps to the gig economy when we generally think of what the gig economy and gig apps actually are. It is a generally easier option to actually lay out in the beginning. Which actually brings me into my first pro when it comes to the pros and cons of driving for Uber, at least in 2025, which is the complete flexibility to work when you want to and when you need to. Because once you're signed up, it really is as easy as clicking the app and going out there and driving. Doesn't mean you're gonna make the most money, and we'll get to that later, but at the very least, it does mean that once you're set up, you are set up, you can go out, you can drive, and you can go do it however you wanna do it. Now, touching on the cons, the first con I have laid out here is probably the most obvious one and the one that everybody's complaining about right now, which is Uber's pay and bonuses are only getting worse. Now, at least in the continental US, this is not a new thing. The pay and the bonuses have been going down year after year, but at the very least, from my experience, at least of the last couple of years, the bonuses especially, but just the pay on top of that as well, have been taking a nosedive. It has been so much worse as of recent, at least from my experience. And I think this, at the end of the day, will just come down to a supply and demand thing. Like, I'm sure there are going to be some markets that will just always need drivers and are always going to be busy to the point where the supply is always more pertinent than the demand, so the pay is going to be better. And then there are going to be markets where it's the exact opposite problem, or there is just too much of the supply, even if there is a lot of demand at the same time, so the bonuses don't really have to play a factor. Now, despite that, one of the other pros I have, even considering the years and years of declining pay in most markets, is that Uber is still one of the highest paying gig apps and gig side hustles available right now to drivers. Now, I don't have the exact statistics right up in front of me, but I'm almost positive if you actually go to look at the average hourly pay of gig drivers before expenses, of course, which is going to be different app to app, Uber is consistently at the higher end of that, if not straight up number one in terms of the best paying gig apps. And that has a lot to do with how Uber is as an actual job and a structure versus something like Doordash, which is based on food delivery. Uber is based on rideshare. So Doordash is so much more lenient towards tips and tipping culture, whereas Uber, it's very nice to get tips, but I wouldn't say it's absolutely mandatory. But what is mandatory, if you've made it this far into the video, is you going down and smashing that like button, because it helps out the Rideshare Guy YouTube channel, it helps us grow, and it helps bring you guys more high quality content like this. And I'm just kidding, by the way, it's not actually mandatory, but it's very much appreciated. So another con that comes with Uber, and admittedly this is not strictly an Uber-based con, but it is still something you have to keep in mind, is you can be fired at any time for any reason, or more specifically, deactivated. Now, while I have not heard a lot of scenarios of people being wrongfully deactivated, appealing it, and still not being reactivated afterwards, you do have to accept the fact that that is a possibility. That is something you agree to, at least in a vast majority of places in the continental US. I know there are some strikes going on and some unionizing that's going on in specific areas, so I can't speak on those areas, but it is still a relative possibility that at any point in time, Uber can just say, yeah, well, this person said this, so you're deactivated, bye-bye. Again, not something that's likely actually going to happen, but it is something you have to accept could happen. And again, that's assuming that you're not in the wrong in that case. Not to say that you will be in the wrong if and whenever that happens, but we all make mistakes. We're all human, so hopefully it doesn't actually cost any of us our jobs. So going back to the pros for a second, another pro that I have, and I might get some hate for this in terms of saying it, but Uber as a side hustle and just as a job is relatively easy. Like, I would say one of the hardest parts about being an Uber driver, at least when I started out, was actually just learning how Uber worked in terms of market demand, supply and demand, actually figuring out where the hotspots are, when to go to them, what days are best, what times are best, like figuring out an actual map and strategy of being an Uber driver. That was probably the most difficult part for me. But once you kind of get over that hump, get over that curve, you're able to schedule things out and make it really work, and you have a system towards it, I mean, you drive people around. It's not that hard. At least I don't think it's that hard, unless you're a horrible driver, which I don't think I am. I like to think that driving is a relatively simple thing once you get the hang of it. So I don't know. I mean, all things considered, it's not, oil rigging. It's not going into coal mines. I don't think it's anything seriously physically demanding. At some point, if you're driving for like 6 or 7 straight hours, then yeah, it will get physically demanding. But in the short bursts of it, I think it's a pretty easy job. I hope that's not too controversial to say, but that's what I'm gonna say. But touching on that too long period, let's talk about a con that we do have to accept, which is over time, your body isn't going to love if you're sitting there for 12 hours a day driving for Uber and being in one stationary spot that probably isn't good for your body. Now, I know most of you probably already know that, so just, again, as a piece of advice, make sure you get up throughout the day, make sure you're hydrated, make sure you get some good time to stretch. If you're gonna need a bathroom break, please, for the love of God, take bathroom breaks if you have the time. Even if you don't feel like you have to go to the bathroom then, the worst feeling in the world is being stuck in a really long ride and really needing to go to the bathroom. Do yourself a favor and use the bathroom breaks when you get them. So another pro I have, and this one is really up to interpretation, but I did put it in the pros list for me personally. Uber does allow you to travel in an unintentionally pretty cool way. Like, most of the time you're not gonna be traveling far, let's make that clear, but in the, in the areas where you're gonna get a really long ride, like an hour plus long ride, and you get to go somewhere you probably haven't been in a while, or, maybe ever, that's a nice thing to have, is that you get to explore a new area. And that's something that I feel like is very novel that we don't tend to appreciate as much. Most of the time, because the pay that follows with that is like not worth it, and a lot of it is just gonna go back towards gas, which, I don't blame, but sometimes you have to see the bright side, I guess. But speaking on that last point, let's touch on another con, which is Uber isn't free. This is a job where you are going to absolutely have to pay for fuel and car maintenance in general. If you have a gas car, obviously oil changes, making sure that your AC is properly working, just making sure your car is properly working regularly. And even if you don't, even if you're like me and you have an electric vehicle, there are still instances where you're going to have to put maintenance into your car. And to truly drive this point home, pun intended, I actually have to go over to the car shop tomorrow where I got my wheels rotated because I need them to go check out my front left wheel to make sure that I didn't get a nail in it or something, because it's losing air pressure significantly faster than my other tires. So cross your fingers for me, guys. Now, the last mark I have here in terms of pros is that sometimes you actually do get to talk to some really cool people. Sometimes. And this is another area that, again, is up to interpretation, because I know there are a lot of drivers that don't really speak to their passengers, which couldn't be me because I talk to everybody. But I love the ability to have conversations with people in a way that's comfortable for me when it's literally my job and it's literally my application. It's just a way of me getting out of my comfort zone. Not really an intentional way, but a way that I absolutely love. And a lot of times when I'm talking to passengers about their lives, I get to learn things. And I think it's helped me immensely as just a person, as a human being, being able to learn about other people's lives and experiences. I think it's a truly joyful thing that we tend to take for granted sometimes. Now, the con to this point is very obvious, because sometimes people are assholes. And I'm not even touching on the point of people like falsely reporting you for things you didn't do, because yeah, that's a whole other issue, which, we touched on a previous con. But in general, yeah, there are some people who are going to be snappy at you. Some people will have no respect for your car. Some people who won't have any respect for your personal space, who don't understand what a personal bubble is. And just, it's very infuriating, and that's why you have Uber customer support at that side, and just the Uber-based support to, you know, give them a rating as well if you really need to, or just to have some way of recompensation. But unfortunately, that talks directly into another con, which is Uber customer support. I don't think I need to explain that one. But just for the sake of the video, I will, because Uber customer support is the worst thing on the planet. I truly, honest to God, hate it so much. I wish so badly that they would just get people who at least understand what I'm asking from them and are not reading off of a script. I have nothing against this person or that person, somebody with a little bit of an accent or anything like that. I don't mind that. I just want to know that my problem's gonna get solved. And the issue with Uber customer support is that it almost never does. I have to like sit there and wait for 10 minutes just to get on the line with somebody who doesn't understand my issue, says they're gonna escalate it to someone else, and never hear back from the issue ever again. Okay, one more point I want to talk about in terms of a con that is going to kind of wrap up this video is car maintenance. Now, I kind of touched on this a little bit, but more specifically, actually keeping your car clean. That is something you're gonna have to get used to doing more often. I'm talking getting a proper car subscription. I'm talking making sure you have cleaning tools in your trunk regularly, or your trunk if you have front storage. You're just gonna have to have more of a mind towards actually keeping your car clean. And more importantly, I really have to emphasize this, make sure your car smells good. It's so much more important than it sounds like, but trust me on that one. But overall, that is my list of pros and cons for being an Uber driver. And guys, I actually want to hear your opinion, so let me know in the comments down below. What are your pros? What are your cons for being an Uber driver? Please try to have a little bit of both. Don't just nag and complain all the time, because I see you guys. I see you. You know, at least a couple positive things to say. That's all I ask. All right? That's all I ask. Well, actually, no, I do have one more thing to ask for you. I want to make sure you guys are subscribed. I did mention that earlier in the video. I'm gonna mention it again. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you guys are subscribed to the Rideshare Guy YouTube channel. And if you want to see another video from me personally, go check out the video over there where I talk about the best gig apps to drive going into 2025. And it's not just Uber. There are multiple gig apps there. I promise you, I do actually know a lot of these gig apps because I've experienced them. So go check out that video. Go check out my personal opinions, and go see for yourself where you sit in that area, because you may actually learn whether or not if Uber is gonna be the right app for you, not only from this video, but maybe from that video as well. But with all that said, that is it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and stay cool.